All
And
right, we
hello.
should be live here. Welcome to the absolutely normal middle of the night impromptu stream. This is going to be on something I did something diabolical and posted on Reddit, and I know you're all screaming in the comments right now, going, "Why in God's name would you do that?" I felt like kicking a hornet. I had a day off work, and I felt like poking a hornet's nest. I thought it would be fun, and I wasn't wrong. Holy crap! I got like in 5 hours, I think I got 140 comments on that. Um, I did not expect people to, and not short comments either, like long, drawn out comments on some stuff that I expected to see, which was just dealing with the mechanical stuff, and yeah, people disagree here and there, and I think they made some important callouts on it. But I wanted to talk about one specific thing, which was that people brought up the opposed roles with AC. The problem with that would be description, and to me, description is the whole point of RPGs. Describing how you're defending your character, because the point of that rule wasn't to make armor class more balanced, it was to not have you sitting around for 5 minutes doing nothing while you're waiting for your turn. It was to break up the GM goes for 5 minutes, each player goes for 1 minute, meaning one player's going, sitting there for 9 minutes doing nothing. Oh, now he's on his phone. Now you need to re narrate everything. Now, like, just it was just such an anathema to how I play. So I thought it was, we're probably preaching to the choir here, but nonetheless, I felt it was worthwhile. Hey, Hunter.
Hello. It is interesting that the medium of an RPG is descriptive. It is the descriptive medium.
Yeah.
So how can you plan on creating any form of experience within that medium without playing the medium? It's like trying to play football, but you don't have a body to actually run around on a grass field, you know?
Right. And I think that's what leads to so many things of players don't know where their characters are. Players don't know where other characters are. They have to go, wait, where is that guy again that was on the horse? There was a guy on the horse, right? Yeah, there's a guy on the horse. Did he charge this other guy? Did he charge him? I'm confused, because they're speaking in purely mechanical terminology, and they're speaking in terms of, can I do something? Which doesn't actually tell you where you are. That just says that it is possible for you to do something. Okay, I shoot the guy. Where is any character at here? There's a guy on a horse. Can I shoot him? Yes, you can shoot him. I don't know where the guy doing the shooting is. I don't know where the guy on the horse is. I just know that there's a straight line between the two of them. Like, that tells me nothing, right? And that's where people get so confused and lost in like the theater of the mind stuff. They get so lost in well, how would you play that without asking a million questions? Well, because you're in the black void behind me. Yeah, you would get
Exactly.
lost in the black void, right? And description's how you shine a light on that.
I think to me very clearly, one of the things that occurs when you start playing a game where you are doing everything within your character is that you are forced into that flow state. That flow state of actually always imagining something within your mind. And if you're averse to even saying and describing things in character, then there is no way to achieve that flow state, and there is no game without that flow state. I would go so far as to be bold enough to say that there is no game without that flow state, because it stops being this cohesive, immersive experience where your character is moving through a world, and it becomes this disjointed, honestly schizophrenic collections of scenes. I think a good
Mm,
example of this is a door, right? So the GM says, "Well, before you stands a door. It is an oaken door." And then he waits, and then the players, and of course he says, "What do you do?" Right? Then the player says, "Can I open the door?" Now, when the
okay.
player says, "Can I open the door?" what is actually occurring? Say that you are actually in good faith trying to imagine the game, because they said it is a game of imagination, right? Imagination is the limit. When a
Right,
player
right.
says, "Can I open the door?" what is occurring within your imagination?
Mm,
What physical manifestation is there in universe that you can
right,
imagine within your mind space?
right.
There is none.
Yeah, but surely they're making hey, Eli.
Watermarks,
uh,
I don't know what you mean,
yeah,
man.
what I don't know what you're talking about, Eli, but no,
I think I got a virus or something.
but surely they are thinking like almost too many steps ahead, because they must be thinking, well, I need to open the door to get to the next thing. So I'm gonna ask, can I open the door? It's not thinking in the present, this idea of thinking in the present, it's I don't know, maybe a habit of trying to guess what the GM wants them to do, a guess of how the person that wrote the module wants them to do, of, oh, there's a door. Well, things aren't placed in the world for no reason, and they're thinking more from a game designer perspective than from a person, a person that's just in the world, you know?
That's a whole other
The
kind of worms, right? I think that's
Right, right.
the classic story of the GM that describes like a bush, and the players, oh, I attacked the bush, I cast fireball on the bush, I burned the bush, I picked the bush up, right? It's
Mm,
this toxic game mentality where if something is brought to attention, then it actually is only because there is game design worthy attention to be given to this to said object. This is the same problem that people in Pathfinder have when it comes to combat, where everything is just pure combat. It is
mm,
because their mind is not actually doing the mindscaping. They're not role playing. They're actually just interfacing with the game mechanics and then using the role play as like the glue that keeps the interface with the game mechanics working. That is the extent to which they are applying the role play.
mm,
That is the way I see it, at least. That is the only way that would make sense to my mind, even because, as
mm.
you said, it makes no sense, right?
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to read because they made a comment on it, or one of the people just made a response to my comment on it, which said, "I understand your position about describing actions. I really do, but believe me when I say there are quite a few players that play the game for the tactical aspect of it, and not the role play. That's true, and they're being very reasonable. They're being the most reasonable of the people that mentioned it." Because a lot of people do. Yeah, as Elf Hunter says, D&D and Pathfinder players are playing a completely different game than role players. We can't expect the man in the cave to give advisable advice to the man basking in the sun. And yeah, but this experience was really just eye opening as to how different things are, because even I want to tackle it from that aspect, from the some people play it just for the tactical wargaming aspect. There's a lot of problems here that can easily be solved by just describing. You're not going to lose characters as much if you're describing what you're doing. The GM isn't going to be confused as to how to adjudicate things if you're describing what you're doing. In my mind, the tactics become even that aspect of the game becomes even better, becomes even easier to do when I don't have to ask you, like pulling teeth, so do you guys open the door, or so are you walking through the door with the other players, or so are you casting this spell now, or are you just asking me if you can cast this spell? You're having to guess, you're having to extract every bit of information as if it's oil from the ground and it doesn't want to release that information, rather than I crack the door open and peek in to see if I can see if there's any movement or activity on the inside. And then if the door was locked, if they couldn't have done that, all I have to do is the door refuses to budge. Just thunk.
That is a fascinating point. I've not thought about it that way before.
Hmm.
The idea that yes, you're playing a tactics game, but every single step adds a certain delay to it. It is so
Right, right.
slow and painfully slow, like pulling teeth, like you said.
Yeah.
It's a very good euphemism for it. In fact,
Hmm.
I would go so far as to say that a lot of 4D can be applied to a board game, and it will make for a more exciting board game. Because that's the
Hmm.
thing, though, right? He is right in the sense that some people are there to play a war game. In fact,
Right, right.
D&D was
Yeah.
first
Hmm.
marketed as a war game, right? It was like
Right,
what,
right. Chainmail.
D&D,
Yeah, yeah.
a new set of rules for a war of one or
Yes,
something
it
like
was
that.
it's like a modification for wargaming. Yeah, yeah. Like a way to play one guy as an army of one.
Yeah, there is no issue with wargaming. Wargaming can be
Mhm.
fun. We just
Yeah,
like to
yeah,
make that
absolutely.
distinction between wargaming and roleplay, right?
Right,
But
right.
wouldn't wargaming be way more interesting if you're not trying the rules and testing them beforehand? Because here's the thing,
Right,
though:
right.
if you go to like a Warhammer,
Mm.
if you go to like a Warhammer competition, and you get you do your turn and say, "Oh, but I didn't want that to happen. Can we undo that turn?" That's something that
Right,
you see all the time in D&D,
right.
right? No, I didn't want
Yeah,
that to
yeah,
happen. Can we
yeah,
undo that turn? Is that a part of
yeah.
wargaming? Is that competition?
Right. Or, what's always also really annoying is the amount of I like a good theory craft as well, but theory crafting is even outside of the game something that gets really tedious, because when you theory craft a bunch of stuff and go, oh, that seems like it would be overpowered. That seems like it would be, totally useless. That seems like, and you can imagine this 5-step process of, if I stand over here, I stand in the doorway, and then I, aim my gun through, and then he's going to walk by. Well, it's a little bit like those karate demonstrations where the guy punches and you do your block, then you punch him in the face, and so far I'm okay with it. All right. And then after you punch him in the face, well, then he's going to be stunned by that. So then you punch him in the stomach, then you grab his other arm, and it's like, well, hang on, dude. Like, why don't you actually try it first before you theory craft a 58-step process and make a 5,000 word essay as to why this isn't going to work or why this would work? Why don't you just try it? That's the beauty of an RPG, of any of these imagination spaces, is that there's no cost to trying stuff. you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of theory that in a vacuum would
Mm.
would work, right? But
Right,
that's the
right,
beauty of an RPG. It's an organic growing experience.
right,
And I
right.
mean, let's first tackle this like war gamers dilemma. Yes, there are
Mm,
war gamers within the sphere of the hobby,
mhm.
and of course, I think that there should be games that go towards the wishes of these war gamers.
Mhm.
I would separate it from the hobby. Not even because oh, they're filthy war gamers, I don't want to touch them.
Yeah.
No, I would separate them for our ease of use. The war gamers
Yeah,
don't want a game like the games we run, and we don't want a
yeah,
game like they run. So why do
eh,
they care so much that we don't call them role players? I don't
right,
understand. Like, so what?
right, and these guys, to their credit, have not had a great pushback on that. Um, but there have been some confusing things where I've said, like, well, it's literally in the name. It's Pathfinder role playing game, not the Pathfinder war game. So I'm going to role play it, and I'm going to make the adjustments I've made here are number one in service to the role play, number two or three, somewhere way down the list there in service of balance. Like I say, I'm going to like try to rebalance the most egregious things, the things that like destroy the way the world functions. Like, for example, another thing that people pointed out here, the uh oh, well, if I add dex to damage because gunslingers get that at level 5 anyways, and all that makes is that if you're an archer, you take 5 levels of gunslinger because, well, why wouldn't you? You want the more damage, but you're not actually using a gun. So it creates this weird way that the world works where it's like, well, yeah, almost everybody's a gunslinger if they're an archer, but they don't actually use guns, and it's just 5 levels that they can't use elsewhere so that they can get a mechanical advantage. And it's like, this is dumb, right? So I'm just like, at level 5, just everybody gets dex to damage to represent, you're getting more and more skilled. You can find those weak spots, and that's okay. That's fine. If it makes people a little overpowered, fine. At least they're overpowered in a potentially interesting way, right? Um, and likewise, are you just going to stand there with another guy that can kill you really easy? No, you're going to start ducking behind walls, start taking cover. And this idea that your battlefield's a big open field where the guy can just go bang 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 bang, and just like, it's theory crafted in a vacuum where it's like, look how much the number that he can do in a round is bigger than the number anyone else can do in a round. And it's like, that's true if you're in a flat black void. Like, that's and it's that part of the wargaming is frustrating, even beyond talking about role play. But
And you know
again,
what's funny?
yeah,
What you said circles perfectly back into description
yeah,
because, like you said, in a featureless black void like you are
right,
in right
right,
now,
yep,
there is no
yes,
way for you to to actually prepare yourself or dodge any of these attacks. And I think that's a very
yeah,
important distinction, right?
yeah,
Because I think it is more the wargamer side of the hobby that enjoys using battle maps, and they always put the
mm-hmm,
battle map down, and they take like 5 minutes to set it up
mm-hmm,
correctly,
yep,
and then they just barely use it. They just keep
mm-hmm,
moving towards the next enemy, and well, of
yep,
course, I shouldn't generalize. I'm sure there are many people that do it better than that,
right.
but to a certain extent, a battle map is not helping there. So what would
No,
help?
because it the interesting thing about a battle map is that it not only explicitly says things that are there, it implicitly says things that aren't there.
The map is not the territory.
Right, which I think is something that's really cool about Theater of the Mind, because I used to, I've got a Proxon hot wire cutter behind me, and a bunch of terrain that I haven't used in years, because I found that players are more likely to look around in the black void and try to find cover. Whereas if they see it on the battle map, they just go, "Well, it's not there, so I guess all I can do here is just stand and Wolfenstein stab this guy over back and forth over and over again." Right?
Exactly. Even back when I used battle maps, when I was more of a what you would call a true DGM, I always told the players, "Listen, what you see on the map is not everything that is there. If you think there would be a cool scene where your rogue like swings in a chandelier, but it's not on the battle map, then you can come up with that, right?"
Right.
And playing in a 4D way makes it so much easier, right? Because in 4D, even out of combat, you're already adding stuff. You're already creating the chair for you to sit down to talk to the NPC.
Right.
You're already creating all of these elements.
Yeah, and that stuff's still there when and if combat starts.
Exactly, but it also feels natural that you will describe the chandelier and you'll swing on it.
Yeah. Or scooting using the chair to create distance, or create an obstacle that somebody has to step around, or
kicking a chair over to the door to block it.
Yeah,
stuff like that,
yeah, these sorts of things. Describing, and Pathfinder as a game gives you so many opportunities to do stuff like this, like the bags of marbles. It gives you rules for making difficult terrain, ripping open your bag of marbles as somebody's chasing you, or to set a trap, around a corner in a dark hallway, stuff like that. It's like, well, you just describe doing that, and then oh, okay, this guy threw a bag of marbles down on the ground. They're there. I know where they are. And I think we as humans too remember description a lot better. So if you do end up having some slow turns, you're gonna remember a lot better a vivid description. At least, I mean, it might be a helpful exercise to try and think of can you remember every question some kid asked in high school? But I bet you can remember one or two vivid descriptions from a book you read, or from a teacher or professor that gave a really a good description of some of
how
them.
would you fix that issue? Right, I think you've identified a core issue there, the issue of the play space being vague, right? And I'll continue with that, but let's read what Elias has to say.
Oh yeah, he's just seconding what we said here, which is, I think, a large portion of RP role players who use battle maps is because they don't describe where the character is in the world, what they're doing, and what that looks like, etc. Yeah, it's a not a solution in search of a problem, but maybe a band-aid solution to the problem of, I don't know where I am, right?
Indeed. I mean, that's exactly what we've been talking about, the issue of vagueness in the play world. And I think that you have hit the nail on the head when it comes to saying that a lot of these issues stem from not really having a good, clear view of it. I think that a battle map only really targets the mechanical aspect of it. Because when you see your character top down and he's like, okay, he's on this room here, he's like 5 feet away from that enemy and 12 feet away from that one. That is telling you everything in mechanical terms.
Right.
And it actually, I would argue that it makes it harder for you to visualize, literally being in this room, the ceiling being this tall, and there's like a guy over there, and there's a guy really close to you here. Seeing this disembodied circle with like your character art right next to an orc does not give you the claustrophobic fear of like being face to face with an orc, right?
Right.
It actually makes it harder.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because I will often describe my character's actions in third person like speech, but I will visualize through the character's eyes. If that makes any sense. Where
I do exactly the same thing.
Right,
I
because
caught flag on one of the campaigns for it.
Well, I'm just so used to GMing that I always end up describing in third person, because switching first person to first person to first person is like really awkward in speech, but it's not awkward in your head, if that makes sense. That's an interesting one. But for example, I've had a lot of fun doing this, playing a blind character, a blind dwarf, and having to visualize not being able to visualize, but he's a spellcaster, so he can see like magical auras when he uses detect magic. So he can see like these vague outlines and shapes of like there's a guy that's using magic, or a spell was cast here like some time ago, but that's about all he can make out. I think that's been super cool.
It would be super cool to have him like try to shoot through a wall, and the spell like is blocked by the wall because he can see the aura through the wall,
Right,
but
right. I
not the
haven't I
wall,
haven't
right?
even thought about that. Yeah,
That'd
no,
be pretty cool.
but yeah, he uses a cane, and he's pretty good at bluffing people. So he's this old blind man with a cane, and it gets people to attack him. But he's a monk, so he doesn't need the cane to walk around. He needs the cane to see where he's find where he's going. So
You wouldn't take
that's
an
been a
old
cool.
blind man's cane, right?
Yeah, yeah. So he's been, been having like fun, like poking around stuff, looking for where things are, you know, listening in
And
on other, the other player characters gossiping about, they're like, I think some of the other player characters were saying like, man, we could hold him down and like put earplugs in him, and then like he would. It's like I'm blind, not deaf. I can hear you.
but it's interesting because like yeah, like a person that is more geared towards the wargaming would be okay,
Hmm.
well yeah, maybe a battle map does not give you the good information that you are in character to take a decision. I would argue that you should stay in character in a role-playing game. You should role play.
Right,
But if you want that mechanical experience, there are a lot of things that 4D does that would actually make that experience better as a wargaming experience. Like,
right.
why
Yeah.
are you play testing, like play driving your turns?
Mm-hmm.
Surely, if what you're doing here is you're having fun playing a turn-based game by paper, like whatever, you're having fun doing it, then why are you retconning your turn sometimes? Why are you asking the GM, if I do this, will that happen? Like, isn't part of the
Yep.
player skill there to know these things?
Explore,
And why are you
or
taking so
to
long?
yeah. Yeah, I
It-
know Wargame is, but yeah, you wouldn't really be exploring and finding out because there's no adjudicator. Yeah. But yeah, that's a really good point. Is you could play, you know, if not twice as many games, one and a half as many games as you would. So, if you can normally fit in 2 games on game night, you could fit in 3 by just following 2 simple rules of just roll the damn dice, do the thing, and know what your army in this case, or your war band or whatever, know what they can do. And those 2 things, and you just roll with the punches, you'll get a lot more experience under your belt. And I find that's true in a lot of things, is that experience doing the thing beats the hell out of thinking about doing the thing, right? That's why I want to get more games out here into this virtual space, rather than and hopefully I'll be able to do so, because I've got one of my games is ending soon with no replacement, so I'll have an extra day every other week, so that'll be nice.
It'll be your 4D day. That's good.
Yes, hopefully.
But I find that like fascinating. Like the war gamers, and I mean, I'm gonna say a thing here that a lot of games do. Not every game does, right? But a lot of these games, it is impossible to lose in them. The GM always, it's Deus Ex Machina. The GM
Yeah,
always pulls something out of his ass and you can't lose. So why are
right.
you playing a war game that you can't lose, that you play very slowly because you're test driving your turns, that is barely even a war game, depending on like the
Mhm,
system you're playing. Now
mhm.
I'm deviating away from Pathfinder because I think Pathfinder has a lot of good mechanics, but
Right.
5e has horrible mechanics. You're supposed to play
Mhm.
like 6 combats like
Yeah, like
every like
6 to 8 combats
day.
a day, which is insane. But that is how a lot of people play Pathfinder, even though I don't think it says anywhere that you should do that. But the way a lot of the modules are written, it's like open a door, there's combat here, open a door, there's combat there. Or people just not understanding how to use like random encounter tables, and they just feel like, oh, we just use these like every mile the players travel, like
Oh
every,
my god.
just like
That is
constant. And guys saying things like, well, this is going to turn like 50 attack rolls per player per session into 100 rolls per player per session. And I'm like, how? And I'm just thinking like, I think the last 2 combats I ran lasted 2 full rounds. Like, it lasted about like 12 seconds, give or take, and then they're like, people are dead, they're taking prisoners, like that's pretty much it.
exactly.
Because I'm adjudicating things, right? I'm playing things as Well, the mechanics tell me something. The mechanics tell me this creature has 13 intelligence. It's an above average intelligent creature. It also tells me, well, this thing probably values its own life. Most things do. Even demons value their own lives. They don't want to be killed. They're down to the last person. The whole galley of player characters is alive and in pretty good condition. They're not going to fight to the last man to just roll more attacks to maybe chip away and have this like health point tax here. No, they're going to give up. They're going to rout here. And I don't. All it took was one player, making an intimidate roll, and it ended up being like a 52 or something. And I'm like, yep, nope, they're good. They dropped their weapon there. That's.
And you know what's funny? Every time someone tells you a story of D&D, it's never about that regimented combat they had where, we had the tank in front, and then we had the healer behind them, then we had like the DPS, and they were like healing them. It's never like that. It's always like a crazy story. Like, we invaded the keep, but we were like dressed in as the other guys. And then like they noticed one of us, so we had to lock in our own friend in the jail, and then we had to like break him out, and then we assassinated the Duke. It's always this crazy scenario that comes organically from the role play. Yeah, but they never see the role play as what they want. They just want the combat. And I don't know. Right. I don't know. I feel as if when someone says that they're in it for the war game, there's a very clear reason why they don't actually go play like an actual well-established war game like Warhammer 40K or something like that. They always go for the role-playing games and try to play war game in it. This is because they do want that experience. It's just that they're not ready to separate the true experiences. Well, actually, they do separate the true experiences. A good example is like Initiative. Initiative changes the way the game is played entirely in these tables.
It will turn a talkative player into like a fucking silent audience member. That's why I say there's like, I've talked about like 2.5D before and things like that, but it's more like one section of the game will be 3D. And then combat happens and it turns into 1D. Like I have to shove some of my players to be like, come on, do the thing. You can do, you don't be scared by your character sheet. Just do the thing. Just describe what you're doing. And then we'll, I'll tell you to roll D20. It's pretty simple. It's not, you don't have to be scared. Where people just get so intimidated because they get, I don't know, the mindset just changes totally from I'm playing a character to I'm playing a game. Those two thoughts are always going to be in your head, but their priority seems to switch whenever combat starts, right? Which is really odd. Let's see, we got some. Oh God, yeah. So one of the people was mentioning like, I would have remembered the tortures will always happen in games with time violations, GMs moving PCs, improper fast travel. Yeah, where. And I already made a video on that on stop moving your players around, which is to say, if off of the back of Bacon's video, if you don't say it, it didn't happen, right? So basically, one person will cross a bridge, and then the other players will assume they won't say anything, but they will be assuming, oh, I also crossed the bridge. And so you're sitting there waiting for like awkward silence. And you're like, okay, well, there's one guy on the other side of the bridge. They see this and like waiting where it's like, and somebody off the wave. It's like, what are you guys doing still standing over there? And they're like, oh yeah, we'll go. So when that happens, so many GMs will just go, oh, all right, one guy's moving. All right, the rest of you are attached at the hip. I'll drag you over.
That is that is an absolutely awful thing. That is very common to do. And if you do it once, it'll become a thing, and it just keeps happening and happening. You need to always fight it.
Yeah, because now people won't. Because now you'll have to do like what I'm doing, and because most of us in my group have played at least one game, if not a lot of RPGs before this, and so now you're having to fight the habit of it's like if you haven't walked in a while, well, you need a lot of physical therapy to get to using those muscles again, right? If you move someone for them, then they're like, all right, I just have to sit here and listen to what happens until he says that magic word, roll initiative, and then my brain goes, what? Oh no, I have to. What's my character?
Roll initiative. Yeah. It's the activation words. Roll initiative. What do? It is your turn.
Yeah.
You can see
What's
like
your
a jolt of life
what's your
back into the
AC?
person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then they're like, oh, I get to play the game again. Whereas
yeah.
if you come at it from the framework of describe your actions always, you're always playing the game, I'm not, and you just make it to where I'm not going to ask you, I might ask you what your AC is, right? But that's something I tried to solve with the opposed roll. Instead of what's your AC, it turns into an arrow's flying at you. And then if you don't tell me how you're ducking out of the way, I'm not going to ask for your AC. That arrow's just going to hit you. Right?
Ooh, that's so good, man. And I
That
mean,
gets you to yeah.
I don't want to ramble, right?
Mm,
But this point of active AC, like active defense,
mm,
is just so natural.
mm.
When you play D&D with like a new player, someone that never played before,
Yeah,
and you
exactly.
say the guy
Yep.
shoots an arrow at you, the first thing is that I dodge. Like I'm not gonna let a fucking arrow hit me, dude. Right?
Right,
It's so
right.
natural to roll for your defense. So
Mm,
why is this abstraction of AC there? It doesn't help the humanistic
right.
experience. It's entirely anti-human. It's
Mm,
artificial.
yeah.
I hate
And
this
some
thing.
some people were even mentioning that they were like, yeah, AC at the base game, it is a problem. It is messy. But people haven't figured out a better way to do it. So, and I'm like, but I'm trying. I'm trying though. And I'm like, just try it my way. Try it my way for one session and see if you like it or not. And they're like, yeah. Well, didn't they have that in 3.5 Unearthed Arcana? No, they had, because what they had in Unearthed Arcana was just an inversion. It was just the defender is the only one that rolls. So it just switched who's doing the describing. It didn't really, which was interesting. But yeah, you're exactly right. You always have that issue with new players where they go in and they're like, "All right, I move my shield up to block," and then the DM always goes, so unless you're a shield fighter and you have that swift action special ability, you can't actually do that. You have to wait for me to figure out whether or not it hits you. And then if it doesn't hit you, the guy who is just swinging a sword at you, will describe how you raise your shield. And it's like, what is this kind of ass backwards? Like, what? It
And
doesn't make any
this
sense.
player was told that imagination is the limit, right?
Right.
That's the
Well, it's my
saddest
limit.
part.
It's the GM's limit. You guys are stuck with the mechanics.
Oh yeah,
I
just
get
keep
to
rolling the
use my limit.
dice.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
get to roll that one. Roll that one
Yeah.
now.
Right,
The
right.
players have become glorified dice rollers. And I mean,
Right,
I think
right.
this circles back to your point, where a good part of it is just trauma. It's player trauma. They played with a GM that for some reason just liked torturing them. So
Oh
now
man,
when they say,
we saw that a lot with one of the guys, and it
"Oh
was kind of sad because the
yeah,"
guy was like, "Well, I feel like lying is the only way to accomplish this because the DM will use, oh, you forgot the torches as a gotcha, and like they're trying
Mm,
to win." And I'm like, "Oh, that sucks, man. Like
that's
that's
awful. Yeah,
because you want to play within a high trust environment, and they just like, you could tell they had their trust like totally erased from uh and that's how two of my players were, right? Like when they were coming in, and it's something I'm working on because they were like, one of them told me a story of how they had the GM just told them roll a d20, nothing was happening. And that number determined how many harpies spawned out of nowhere and started fighting them. And I'm like, God, that's fucking miserable. Yeah, if that was your first experience, I wouldn't want to play with these fucking nerds either. Like,
but it's funny because like a lot of this comes from tournament play. Like, why are we taking tournament play into consideration when doing this?
yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Like,
Do you really
you know,
want to like? So the thing with the door, like, oh, I'm
mhm,
gonna open the door, but before I open the door, I'm gonna look there, see if there's a string under the door, under the door
mhm,
frame, and then I'm
mhm.
gonna look to see if there's like any catch, and I'm gonna like turn the knob just a little bit, just as, like maybe there's like a little like noise, like a
Yeah,
mechanical
yeah.
noise. Oh, and the planks. Okay, is there like anything between the planks? Can I see anything through the gap? It's like, dude, it's a
Being like
fucking door. Like,
neurotically careful, and it's like, and at that, I think it's fun that you can make that like a comedic scene, right? And like set the tone going forward, where like a guy just cracks the door open, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing? You could have just knocked. And then it's like,
yeah,
okay. And then that can like lower people's defenses, that can be them to go like, oh
yeah.
no, most 99% of doors out there are just doors, and not these they almost, a lot of the tournament dungeons almost feel randomly generated with how many, where it's just like, this door is locked, this door isn't locked, this door is trapped and locked, and it's like I know this was
Yeah,
designed by a crazy person, but come on, this
show
is
us in your
just
character sheet where your GM abused you, right?
right.
That's like what I think when I see that.
Right, exactly. Like if you've ever played through like Rapanathuk or these others where you literally have to be like moving 5 foot forward and then like poking the ground with a stick and then moving 5 foot forward and then poking the ground with a stick and then and you're just like that is man, if you just describe one simple description, I'm moving carefully and methodically. Oh wow, now the GM has to be more forthcoming. They can't use if they use these gotchas, now you know it's time to leave that table. Now it's
Exactly,
like
yeah.
if you
And I think
just
this ties back to the post, because one of the messages I saw in the Reddit post you made is that not everyone is an actor. They say, oh, and the example they give is like, oh, I, Sir Arthur of the great country of England,
yeah,
put forth my lance and charge
yeah,
down as I
yeah,
strike down this evil
yeah,
dragon, aiming for its
yeah,
wing, trying to
yeah,
tear through the wing as if it were
yeah.
a leathery thin. Like, dude,
That's yeah.
I put my lance
Description,
forth and
yeah,
charge down, right?
yeah. Description doesn't mean Shakespearean, right?
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean acting either, right? When was the last time you saw Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man go, Tony Stark puts on his suit of armor and no, that's not how it's done. Or even if he was doing a first person, he wouldn't say, I'm putting on my Iron Man suit. No, it's a thing that's happened. It's a linguistic way to get across visual terms, right? Like that's not what acting is, right?
And I think that visual term is a very good thing, because a lot of these issues, they stem from not having a mind space, right? So let's go back to the torches example, which
Mhm,
I'll make very clear. It's an example of this player that didn't describe the torches. He didn't describe
mhm.
bringing a torch, so the GM said
Yep.
that he has no torches, and he got
Yeah.
angry. And I think he said that he makes a new character that has torches or something like that.
Right.
Like he's not
Right.
the
Yeah.
same.
Something along
Yeah,
those lines. Yeah.
it's a bad faith argument, but
It
whatever.
is. Yeah. I specifically used that argument because I thought it was something that was very minor. It was something that was fairly easy to forget, and it was something that there's a million ways to solve other than having torches, right?
Exactly.
Like so.
It
Yeah.
is a misalignment of expectation, though, right?
Mm,
That's the biggest issue, because the
right.
player, he wants to have torches. That is
Right.
his number one goal, to the point that
Right.
he's willing to make a new character to have torches.
Right.
Well, whilst you want to role play. I'm here to play a role playing
Right.
game. Like,
Right.
why are
Role
you
playing.
this autistic about like getting a
Right.
torch?
And it's not like Uh, that's even if it was a lost state, but that's why I used that example because it wouldn't even be a lost state. It would just be a complication. It would just be, oh shit, I forgot to get the torches. My super intelligent wizard has been so caught up, his head's just been stuffed in his book that he looks up and goes, oh shit, I forgot I can't see.
That's so
you
cool,
know,
because now you're conveying something about the character, right?
right?
But
Exactly.
if you're playing a game and there is no mind space, if, like you
Mhm.
said, oh, one of the players describes going across the bridge, but the other players didn't, so now the GM moved you. If we get
Yeah,
to that hazy state, and I think
right.
I'll go back to the door example, right? Where
Mhm.
the GM describes a door, one of the players describes, oh, can I open the door? And then Jim says, yeah, behind the door is an empty room. There are 3 doors leading to north, east, and west. And then one of the players says, okay, what about this like door in the west? Like, can I go over to it? And then the other player says, oh, I'm gonna like open the next door. It's like, what are you envisioning in your head? Like
Yeah, it's
seeing that example of play.
like the next door? Are you meaning like clockwise from the west? So that would be the southern door. That would be the door you came from. Wait a minute. No, oh no, wait, west is on this side. So if it was clockwise, it'd be the north door. And you're like,
Exactly. Like,
yeah, is there what's the lighting in this room? Can I even, what does the
if the
doors
GM
look
is
like?
moving
What are
you,
they made
and
of?
if the
Yeah,
yeah, if the GM is moving you, and if the players are speaking in uncertain terms,
right.
and it's not even clear for the player describing if they're opening the door or not. Like, can I open the door? Is not
Yeah.
nothing. You're
Yeah,
talking
no.
to the GM. There's nothing happening in universe when you say,
Yeah.
"Can I open the door?" It's actually an example of an abused player, because
Yeah.
no one wants to say, "Oh, I go and open the door," because he might be
Yeah.
the guy that dies like a random trap,
Yeah, there
right?
might be a fucking grenade on the other side of it or something,
Yeah.
you know?
But now, like, imagine the scene from this angle. Like, the GM
Yep.
describes the first door. The player says, I slowly walk up to the door. I put my ear
Mhm.
to it. Then I
Mhm.
look back to my friends. And then the next player says, I'm right behind you. I'm ready with my shield in case anything is
Mhm.
behind the door. And the other player says, I'm staying 20 feet away. I ready my bow and arrow. Then
Mhm.
the player says, I slowly open the door. And then the GM describes the other 3
Yep.
doors.
Yep.
Hey, Archer, you think you can keep your eye up there on that east door? I'll go for that one. Come with me. now you're actually envisioning what is happening,
Yep.
right? You have the
And
archer
I, as the
pointing at.
GM, would call for a perception check on the guy listening to the door. See if he hears something. There we would have one roll, and something meaningful would happen. Somebody complaining, we'd have so many rolls, and I only describe when something meaningful happens. Well, how about here's a meaningful description? You don't hear anything on the other side of the door. That's meaningful. That's on
Exactly.
one side of things. You could think, well, wait a minute, I didn't get any information. No, that's a ton of information. That's the information that, well, there's probably nothing. I can't do anything more by just listening here. So I need to move forward. Or I need to try one of the other doors. Or I need to try another method of perceiving something. The possibilities are limitless there, but that information that you get, that's super meaningful, right?
Exactly, right? And if you have all this information, right? If you're always envisioning in your head what is happening in the game, if you're envisioning yourselves like this cool group that's like kicking doors down, like this medieval SWAT team, right?
Yeah.
You're not gonna forget about the torches because you're always like thinking about your characters. So you're not gonna like stop and say, "Oh, I don't have a torch."
Right.
The issue with like forgetting the torches only really happens if you're sitting there for 40 minutes because this guy is still like checking for traps on this fucking door, and you forget about the torch.
Yep. Or you'll crack that door open, and then the GM will describe, how it's getting dark as the light's starting to fade away from the entrance to the cave or the dungeon or whatever into the darkness as the steps go down, and then you'll look back and go, "Who's got a light? Don't tell me we all forgot a light." That's the other thing. That's the other absurdity of it. Is it's like, are you kidding me? Literally every single one of us doesn't have a light source. Not one person like that. That's an absurd situation too, is part of why I brought it up, right? It's like, it's not the end of the world. What would be the end of the world is one person breaking character and then negotiating with the GM out of character, and then we have to get back into the mind space after we've gone, well, you could have had torches, but if you crossed the river, then they would have been waterlogged. So would it have even mattered? And then like, well, no, because if I had torches, I also would have gotten a like oilcloth to wrap them in, so they'd be waterproofed. And then I would have done. And then you're like, okay. And now we're back in the dungeon, and now it's like, wait, where were we? Oh yeah, I was third guy in the line, and there were 3 doors. And which one of those is faster? Right? Which one of those got us to the point of the game, the role play? And for a lot of people, the point of the game, exploring the dungeon in the Dungeons and Dragons, which Pathfinder's a Dungeons and Dragons, it's a
It is
it
the
got us
Dungeons and Dragons, yes.
For both of these purposes, it got us closer faster, right? So
even if you were a board gamer, it got you to the fight you wanted much faster.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, just that zooming in on that situation too, it tells me these other 3 doors, 2 or 3 doors, I don't even remember. They aren't that fucking important right now. We're talking about one door right now. If I, as a GM, one of the other, there's like a undead like stumbling out because they're making noise from one of the doors. Maybe I'm thinking about that. But in the mindscape of me as a player stacked up on this, I'm thinking about this door. If I'm the archer, I am still thinking about the other doors, but like the way that the description focuses the camera, so to speak, the sort of the granularity, the resolution, I think has been a term that's been thrown around. That's really cool, right? And it's something you're not going to get by, can I open the door? It's like, well, you could. It's theoretically possible for you to open the door. That's progressed us not at all.
The worst part is that, yeah, there is no progression, but they just continue playing. Like, can I open the door? And then the GM says, yeah, the door is open now.
Yep.
You can't visualize what is happening.
Well, there's progression if there's no consequence, but the moment there's consequence, it's, oh no, I didn't want to open it yet. No, I wanted, hold on, can I have done this thing? Can I have, then if there's consequence, there's 30 more can I's after it, right? It's like, guys, play Guess Who. Does your character have a mustache? No. Does your character have glasses? Yeah. Like, or just describe what the character looks like, and Guess Who would be done in 2 seconds. It wouldn't be a game, right? Like, that's what you want. I think the farther away from the board game Guess Who that you get, the better.
I would agree, yeah, because
Maybe that's a good exercise. Maybe we should do that, trying to play Guess Who in opposite, trying to lose Guess Who as quickly as possible. That could be a good descriptive little practice. Like like trying to guess who your character, you describe your character as clearly as possible.
that'd be pretty fun, yeah. There is this clip that I've seen. It's one of the big name GMs. I think it's like Brennan Lee Mulligan or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And he's giving advice on how you should run your games.
Yeah.
And he says that your players are like water. They'll always go through they want to go through the path of least resistance. And as a GM, your job is to make a path of least resistance that is fun to play through, right?
Mm,
It's the whole concept of you don't want your players to take like a long rest between every fight because now it's like easy for them. Although they
right.
want to do that because they want to win the game.
Mhm.
And I stop and think and say, wow, how does this hobby even have game masters? Like, isn't that a lot of pressure to put into the shoulders of your GM?
It's a
That
ton of pressure to put on the GM. It's a comment on how shit the long rest rules are in 5e. It's yeah, when you're people talk about like the pressure under a social situation, because a lot of us are social, and the social ineptitude of the hobby, and it's like, dude, I have fucking autism. Like you're not going to win that war with me. I'm sorry, but unless you're literally nonverbal and you're trying to play an RPG, I don't want to hear it. Like, but it's the people talk about that from the one perspective, but they never talk about the gee, maybe I'm causing GM burnout by not wanting to put up my end of the bargain. It's like, yeah, there's a GM shortage because there's a good player shortage at the same time. There's also a good GM shortage. It's they feed into each other. It's cyclical, where it's like bad GMs cause players to not want to engage in the hobby anymore. They cause some players to want to power through the suck, but now they play in a way that sucks. So now they're bad players. So now other people who GM don't, they're like, fuck, dude, I can't get past one room because a 2-minute combat takes me 6 hours. It's,
what's
it's
that
just,
Evola quote? Like,
yeah, yeah,
weak GMs create bad times create strong GMs create weak times, and then
yeah,
they
yep,
always go back into
yep,
each other.
yep,
That isn't how it goes, unfortunately.
yep,
There is indeed a good player shortage, unfortunately.
yep, yeah,
Because if you're actually role playing, then you have the same goal as the GM. Like, why is the GM the sole person, the director, the sole person that wants to create a fun story, and all the players, all they want to do is show up and beat the encounter as viciously as possible? Why is there this
right,
misalignment?
right,
A lot of these people, these usual mainstream YouTubers,
yeah.
create these videos of advice saying, "Oh, this player wants this from your game. This player wants that from your game. This player wants
Mm.
that," and
Oh,
then
that's
they
a good
stop it
point.
there. Like, you're supposed to give it to all of them.
Right. That's a good point. Is that there's a pushback on realizing what kind of players you have and go and simply going, I don't think this is for you, right? No other hobby has that, right? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu does not go, to Mr. Max, I don't really like the grappling thing. I have I don't like I like striking. I don't like being in like close contact with other sweaty dudes for long periods of time. And goes, oh no, that's okay. We'll try to make Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu work for you under those contexts. Like, no, that would be impossible. It wouldn't be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu anymore. They just say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu probably isn't for you. You might try kickboxing or karate or Muay Thai or any of these. Why is it not that way? Why does every group have to be for everyone? And you have to like try to grind and try to jam like a square peg into a round hole, but you're the one doing that as the GM. It's the players aren't putting their end of it, and they just want to be included. They just want to be there, and I think it has to do with part of the social ineptitude of I don't want to describe anything. I need a social hobby, but I'm totally antisocial. I need so they end up here. They end up at the bottom of the barrel.
Oh god, we are at the bottom of the barrel, aren't we? Oh,
Well, well, it's interesting because we were the role players were the punching bag of well, I guess the hobby world, I guess you would say, for a really long time. Role players, guys that build model trains, guys, the autists and weirdos of the hobby. But then the Critical Role thing happened, the Stranger Things thing happened. You started seeing a bunch of D&D stuff in Hot Topic, and like, there were some hot chicks, and it was like, whoa, hang on. what's going on here? And now there's like a weird intersection of people are still socially inept, but it's like, oh, that's that Stranger Things thing. That I've heard of that before. And it's like, so to a layman, it's like maybe they're not totally socially inept, but they still are. They still are. They,
They still are, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I
So
think one of the
that's been
issues
an
there is
interesting
that you
thing,
already have this massive pool of nerds that were perhaps
right?
the original audience,
Yeah.
and the way they communicate is actually through mechanics. That is what created the floor of the culture of the hobby, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a rather big issue because I mean we are like an offshoot of the hobby, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in fact, like people want to make
Yeah.
fun of us. Oh, you guys are
Mhm.
drama kids,
Yeah. Yeah, right. You're
and then
LARPers.
they
You're actors. Yeah, yeah. Not
yeah,
every
and then
I keep seeing people going, not everyone's good at improv. And I'm like, okay, but not everyone's good at knowing the rules to a TTRPG either. You learn it. How did were you born with the ability to play Pathfinder? No, you learned it. It was a skill you learned like anything else. So it's like this idea that people just give up at the first, it's not about not being good at it. It's about not wanting to get good at it. That's the honest truth of it is you don't want to do it, and there's nothing wrong with that, but just be upfront with that. It's like, you have a bit of a social complex about, pretending to be someone else and pretending to visualize the thing. That's fine. What we do is weird. But I think it's also very human. I think it's only been made weird in the 21st century, maybe the 20th century.
yeah, it's funny because they'll call exactly like you said, right? We actually criticize their games.
Mhm. Right.
They will call us LARPers, but then they'll cry bully when we criticize their games,
Right,
and that's
right.
the funniest
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
right?
that's an intro. Or when you say, "Where's your game, bro?" That's um, you know, right. Like there was I did ask for feedback, so I didn't say it, but there was an element where I went, you know, I asked for criticism. Maybe I should have said, try it first and then criticize it, right? See if your theory crafting comes true. Just try just the social contract part. Just try not asking the GM any questions. See how that changes your game. See how you play because to me, even the puzzle of figuring out like how I'm going to do something in character becomes a fun part of it, right? It's like, I'm going to cast a spell here, and I don't remember what it does. I do need to look it up. Crispy was talking about that earlier. And he does it without devices, which is like, good lord, that's insane. That's good luck, Crispy, on that one. But I'm like, what's a way to do that if I do have to stall for a little bit while I remind myself whether, if Bark Skin is 10 minutes a level or 1 minute a level. Oh, I'm flipping through my spell book, reading the description. There we and I'm like, no, that's fun. I get to think of how I could do this in character instead of having dead air, or instead of saying, oh, I need to look that up real quick. I forgot what that did. you know.
And it
And
also
I
is a
think,
side of
yeah,
player skill, right? A lot of these
yeah,
war
yeah,
gamers, they want to be skilled players and they want to see their
right,
skill carry them in the game.
right,
But then what happens is they can pause the game for as much as they want to look up, oh, I have 7 spells. Let me see. Oh,
right,
no, this
right,
one wouldn't be that
exactly,
good.
yeah, exactly.
And they say, oh no, this one will deal a little bit less average
Mm.
damage per
Yep.
round.
Yep.
And like they're not that's not skill.
Right.
Literally anyone can, if they have infinite time, can figure out how much damage to do in that turn, right? Player
Mhm.
skill is prompted as soon as it's your turn. What do you do? Like, oh
Mhm.
crap, fireball over here.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
an element of player skill, and that is why in a
Yeah.
4D game you can still have a very rich tactical
Yeah. Yeah. The
experience.
the the, the tactics, they're not at odds, and I was trying to explain that to people. Is like the mechanics, the tactics, and the role play. They're not at odds. That's why it's called a role playing game. All one acronym. It's not role playing game. It's not. It's a one acronym. They're not at odds. You should. There's a lot of tactical depth to be had, while still being in character. Um, I would argue even more so because now you're thinking about the psychological things. You're thinking about psychological warfare, not just the mechanical. Do I kill this guy or not? Because you get into a very uh, think of a long slog of a combat in real life. The Vietnam War. Why was it like that? Well, because here they were just thinking of it as a total numbers war. It was, we're just going to kill more Vietnamese soldiers than American soldiers die. And then by the end of the war, we'll win. Sounds great it's 5 years and there's a bunch of protests over here and the Vietnamese are still fighting. And wait a minute, on paper, we should have won the war like 2 years ago. What's happening here? Well, it turns out people aren't numbers. They're a little more complicated than that. They have families. They think about these things. People get tired of fighting, and so if you're solely thinking about the mechanics of things, not the description, not the character behind the character sheet, you'll end up with these things that are incongruous with creating an interesting world.
Indeed, it makes me think of one of the most memorable moments I had in one of my games.
Mm-hmm.
This is back in 2D. I didn't play that deeply, right? But it was, I think, the first time that the party fought something that was like actually human. They were fighting, I think, bandits in the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the bandits, they try to get the players to give them their gold. They're highwaymen, and then the players don't give their gold. And one of the players says, "I'm shooting one of them," and he looses an arrow and it hits the chest of one of the bandits.
Yeah.
And then what happens is the players want to roll initiative, but say, no. One of the bandits runs up to the guy and holds him, clutches him, and pulls him closer, and begins like trying to drag him away. Now the players feel.
Uh-oh. He's cutting out. He's cutting out on me. I don't know if that's me or them, but I'll try to fill the air while he's frozen on us. The viruses have truly infected his computer. One of the big issues with that is exactly that, is the assumption that these characters will just fight to the death. They'll just, they're these unthinking they're these unthinking mobs, just like in because in a video game you have AI that controls these things and they pull aggro at a certain range, but we have the advantage of we don't have to use AI. We can just use our real intelligence. So insofar as we have it. And we can really imagine how these characters would do these things rather than leaving it up to some kind of algorithm. If this, then that. Let's see. You should always spam this video. It's a really good one, and I think there were some people that were pushing back on the idea of taking it this seriously, but one person that was like, "No, I like taking it seriously because these are hours of your life, guys. It's something you absolutely should take seriously. Something that you, at least I think, right? And serious doesn't mean morose. It doesn't mean you have to be dark and brooding. My character has died. This has caused me great mental anguish, and he's back. No, it just means accept it as something that takes hours of your life every week or every month or however often you play. Some people play multiple games a week, many hours of your life. Yeah, you should accept that. I think one of the reasons, you ever watch those, video game gamer rage compilations, I think there is a real humanness to getting mad at something that you've spent hundreds or thousands of hours of your life on. It should be taken seriously, right? Oh, it's just a game. It's like, okay, if you phrased it if you changed the framing from "it's just a game" to it's just, let me check. It's just 3 months. Now it's like, whoa, hang on. What? Huh? Yeah, it's just hours that you could have spent working out. It's just hours that you could have spent doing one of your other hobbies. It's just hours that you could have spent with your family. If you don't role play with your family, it's just, when you start framing it like that, well, don't you think you should take it more seriously, right? And maybe some people won't. Maybe some people will equate it to sitting on the backyard smoking a pipe, and it's just that for them. It's just relaxation, right? Right. Yeah, and if it's just a game, don't stay up all night prepping for it, right? That's exactly the incongruity with that statement. It becomes like a deflection at that point, right? It's, well, just prep more to solve the problem. And I'm like, well, I think you could change the game in this way. Oh, dude, it's not that serious. It's just a game. Well, hang on a minute. Like, you can't hold both of these ideas to be true. You can't. You're lying to yourself more than you're lying to me.
Exactly. I think it is a form of coping, right? They're coping that this is the way they play. And a lot of these
Mhm.
people are people that have been playing the same way for years, right?
Right.
And you can understand the human aspect of
Mhm.
not wanting to have that taken away from you.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we have to look at from that regard too. A lot of these
Well,
people
dude,
may
I'd fucking love if there was like a study that came out that said like, dude, actually you should smoke like a pound of tobacco a day. It's super good for you. It's like that would be awesome. But
oh
I'd be lying to myself, dude. Like that's obviously not gonna come out. I'd love if those 1800s doctors were totally right. I'd love if those guys
you know what's
but
funny? I think there is some evidence that nicotine is good for you. The
yeah,
issue is
yeah.
that smoking is a horrible way to get nicotine because it burns your
Right.
lungs, right?
Right,
But
right.
like a nicotine patch can give you nicotine, and I think nicotine like makes like the nerves, the very ends of your nerves, it increases their health or something like that.
Yeah,
Don't quote me on that. I didn't
because
actually
it's a
Google it. Choose that.
it's a mild antidepressant which is reversible, which is pretty rare even for pharmaceutical antidepressants, and we could build a case for nicotine here, but yeah,
Let's not do that.
it would be a distraction to the big picture issues, right? It and uh what is that called? Confirmation bias, cherry picking, where we're looking for things where it's to support our case, but we've already made the case where it's like, well, I'm here for fun, and it's like, yeah, but you just said you got burnout on all this prep work, and you won't have to do as much prep work if you describe things in the moment, because when you describe a broom closet, a janitor's closet, you're already starting to picture there's going to be a mop bucket there. I didn't have to prep that there was a mop bucket there. Instead of going, well, GM, is there a mop bucket there? And you're going, oh shit, dude. I spent 2 hours to forget that there's a mop bucket in here. That feels way worse than spending 2 seconds to say there's a room with a mop bucket in it, or it's a janitor's room, and
And that's
ending it
another
with that.
issue if you think that the GM should describe everything that is on the scene.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
That circles back to description, right? Should the
Mm-hmm.
GM describe everything that is in a broom
Mm-hmm.
closet? Like
Yeah.
you open the door to a broom closet. The player can already imagine, like depending like on the time setting. Oh, maybe there's like bleach here, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
it's like a zombie apocalypse kind of scenario,
Yeah,
right?
and
And
you're
you can
trying to like
use
make a,
bleach.
you're trying to make a, poison or something for, or just clean an infected wound or something like that. Sky's the limit, right? Um,
I
it,
think that this discussion is mostly geared towards like this side of description, right? Which is what
right,
we
right.
maybe we should describe like why is description. I think we've said why description is important, right?
Mm,
It is important so that you can maintain this stable vision of all the
mm,
things that are happening throughout a game. You can
mm.
just see it going, right? Like seeing a movie in your head, which
Yeah.
is definitely how the 4D guys like playing it.
Mm,
But besides description being important for that, what makes good description? Because I think people will agree that there is good description and there is bad description. So why do we describe,
mm.
right?
Right, right.
And one of the importances of description is establishing setting, tone, and the world in front of you. That is very important, right? So maybe it is not necessary for you to describe the
Mhm.
little what's the name of those like little bushes that bounce around in the western? I forgot the word,
Oh,
right?
tumbleweeds. Yeah.
Yeah, a tumbleweed.
Yep.
Maybe there's no point in describing a
Right,
tumbleweed movement,
right,
but when you describe the
right.
tumbleweed, that the players get a feel, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that if you describe all of a broom closet, like what feel
Mhm.
does it give you, right?
It's
This
very clinical, and two, it tells me there must be something important here because he described it in such detail that I feel like I need to spend a lot of time in this broom closet, right?
exactly describing the broom
Yeah.
closet doesn't just pass the information of what is there in the broom closet. A lot of people
Right.
say that the GM is a referee, and to a certain extent, he
Mm.
is. But if the
Yeah.
referee starts going in depth of everything that is there on the broom closet,
It sure is.
you'll get really weirded out by it.
Mhm.
And I think
Right.
one of the things is that description.
Mm.
But
I like back when I ran sometimes you will see if you read box text, which is like one of the worst habits to have. Box text I think should be summarize it and just that's just a description of the room, right? That's just part of it. Don't read word for word box text because when you do that, you will find yourself occasionally describing a painting that doesn't actually matter. But the problem is, and I've had this issue where you'll describe a painting that's a portrait of some noblewoman, and exactly what she's wearing and the gold border of it. And then players are going, there's got to be like a safe or something. And they take the painting down and there's no safe behind it. They're like, must be a magically hidden safe. I start casting detect magic on it, and it's like there's no magic on it. It's like, damn, they hid this really well. Where else could it be? And you're like, oh my god, it's just a painting. It's like you're tearing your hair out, going like, fuck, like, oh
But you know
no.
the issue, right? I think that's a great example. One of the issues there is also that it's artificial, and I think
Right.
we've landed into
Right.
this artificial versus humanistic design before.
Uh-huh.
Because let's go with the example of the box text about the painting, right?
Yeah.
You're not gonna have a box text about the foyer of the mansion. You're not gonna have a box text about the hallway you're going down. So say, oh, it's a foyer. There's like red carpet, and then oh, it's a hallway. There's like windows. Oh, but now you come upon a painting. It is finely engraved. A brass fitting fits it against the wall. It depicts the scene of a duke holding up his hands, holding the skull of God. Of course, you're gonna stop because they can feel that artificial quality to it.
It's not written how you would speak, and you're spending way more of your time describing this 4 foot by 4 foot thing than you would describing the whole rest of the area. Then it's like, well, it must be important. You're saying something implicitly by zooming in on that. It's like if the camera in a movie suddenly made a hard cut and then just zoomed in on one character's face, you'd be like, okay, either this cinematographer, either this director doesn't know what they're doing, or that character is important. Is one of the two. If you ever watch like The Room with Tommy Wiseau, there's a lot of that just cutting, and you're like, what the fuck? What happened there? And it's like, oh, I see. They had to edit it together really ugly because they lost one of the actors halfway through, and so there's like a really ugly cut here as they had to. It's like it leads to those things, right? It leads to you thinking like, and now I'm thinking as the player where I'm like, okay, so this must be important. So why would it be important? And I'm not thinking as my character anymore. I'm thinking like as a game designer, why would this painting be important? Like
exactly. I think roleplay solves everything, and that is an example where you should stay within the humanistic bounds of what you and your players are doing. And I've never seen box text work well. I've never seen it work well.
No.
You can always feel that shift of the player, of the GM describing things.
Yeah.
So you either do box text for everything or you do it for nothing. And I think doing it for nothing is better because the book's never going to predict everything that happens.
Right,
it's like
right.
It's exponential, right? The more choice you give your players, the faster it grows into infinite possibilities.
Right. In the box text, it should be things like effectively just description, like static things that don't change. That's when box text can be okay, but inevitably you'll run into a piece of box text that is like a pre-written piece of dialogue, and it's like what this guy is just gonna shout at the players no matter for 30 seconds.
5e has that.
While they stand there, and it's like, no, I'm gonna throw a spear at this dude. Like, I'm not letting him monologue. What are you talking about?
5e is almost like a video game. It has that like, oh, if the player say this to this NPC, then he'll say that. If they say that, he says this. And it stops being a role-playing game at that point. I mean, I don't know.
Like hey, Dice Tales, I like summarizing box text, right? Like if I'll just pull up like a random thing and just find some box text real quick, and like as a way that I would oh god, I'm in maps. This is not fucking things. This is not working at all. Okay. Jade Regent, that was something that somebody mentioned. That's also fucking maps. God damn it. This did not this did not copy over well at all. Oh my god, it's maps in here too. What the hell? There's the PDF. I found it. I did it. I'm sure we can find a box text really soon. Let's see. Oh my god, there's a fucking huge wall of box text. I'm not gonna read that whole thing. Let's see. This is formatted really fucking weirdly. There we go. This small temple is dedicated to Shizuru, the goddess of ancestors, honor, and the sun, the patron goddess of Minkai and creator of both the imperial seals and the island's magical conduit to the afterlife. Okay, what about the shrine would give them that information?
It surely has the same box text in universe. Like when you
mouse it's a plaque over it. Right, if it's like a that would be really funny if there was like a plaque, just because those things exist in real life. You have like this is dedicated to, and somebody's like, make a knowledge check to see if I know about this goddess, and some guy's just like reading off. It's like it says right here. That would be a funny scene. But instead describe, that would make me look at, look elsewhere in this AP on like, okay, what is this goddess about? Like what's the, what do these imperial seals look like? I might just show a picture of it, instead, like what visual information would tell the players and their characters that this is dedicated to this goddess, um, if it's dedicated to a sun goddess, I would immediately say like, oh, it's a small temple, there's like a burning, sun emblem emblazoned in tile on the floor, and then move on. And now they would know that's in my words, that's
And they would feel more natural for it too,
mhm,
right?
yeah.
And that's the thing, though, right? I've been
Yep.
saying how the description helps
Yeah.
evoke the setting and the
Mhm,
theme of the game.
mhm.
To a certain extent, why wouldn't the players describe it too, right? I would
Yep.
be against something like a game. Like there are games that say, oh, the GM says, oh, now you describe this player, because that takes him out of character.
Mhm.
Instead, it would be fine if the player himself brought these details, right?
Right,
Something happened
right,
recently in one of
exactly.
the games I played where one of the players says, I walk past
Mm,
a painting. It's like, oh,
mm,
that's a cool idea. So I make it a painting of their ancestors, and
mm.
together organically we're building the scene and we're adding more and more detail to it.
Right,
So the player
right.
says, I walk past a painting, like it is a painting of your ancestors.
Mm,
There is your grandfather, and you remember
mm.
seeing him, but there is white paint thrown over his face, and it has been defaced, right? And now, like, we're slowly building up the dread. It was a more horror type game, right?
Yeah, yeah, that'd be cool.
The player bringing up a shrine would be more interesting in that regard, right?
Mhm, yeah.
Um, and
Like,
one thing that you,
it could just be a building with a sun emblazoned on it, and one of the players, one of the characters could go, "This must be a temple to some place," and me as a GM would go, "Aha, yes, exactly, it's a temple to something." All I had was there's a building with a sun emblem on the ground, like, like I really like, I think randomly generating dungeons can be a good exercise for this, for just like getting, literal bits of random stuff, and then being like, huh, that's interesting, and then trying to piece together something kind of coherent from it, is that can be fun. A good exercise on bouncing off of stuff. This is funny. This is kind of one of the best things that Dungeons and Dragons Online, the MMO, does, is you have a DM that is narrating things as you're going through it, and it's really funny. It 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 feels a lot like playing a typical Dungeons and Dragons game. Even better in some cases, because they actually narrate, they actually describe, right? But it is this voice that's just coming out of nowhere from the sky, which is really funny.
I
But
think
yeah.
that Baldur's
Oh,
Gate has dream sequences like that too,
mhm,
which is pretty cool. The first
mhm,
Baldur's Gate,
yeah.
the good
Yeah,
ones.
yeah, yeah, where they toy with the, they kinda toy with the idea of, oh, what is it? Almost like Morrowind has Chim, where like the DM almost is like a spectral force in the world for things. They do that more with like Planescape Torment too.
Oh,
Uh,
playing Escape Torment is so good, man.
yeah, yeah,
It's crazy. It's all
mhm,
like a lot of these are like very interesting games, and the
mhm.
concept of Chin is just so cool. I find
Yeah,
that
right,
kind
right.
of idea really interesting.
That's such a good way to in world describe something that your mechanics are doing, and it's like, man, video games can do it. Why can't we? Like, because
Yeah,
obviously you're gonna
I
have,
love video games that have like
you know,
in-world explanation as to
yeah,
your superpower
yeah,
of
diegetics,
saving and
yeah,
loading.
yeah, right,
Saving and loading is
yeah,
insanely powerful if you think about it, right?
yeah, yeah,
And seeing the game react to you saving
yeah,
and loading is insane.
yeah.
There's a game called,
Metal
yeah.
Gear Solid, where you have to call them up and go like, "Hey, I want to save here," and then they'll drop you
There's a
back
game
in. Yeah,
called Caves of Quad, and
yeah, yep,
it's literally a spell. There's
yep,
a spell called Premonition that allows you to play for a while and then reload back, because you were having like a
yep,
premonition of what would happen if I did that.
yep.
Uh,
Show don't tell. Yep. Show don't tell. That's a man, and that's such a good principle for these things, is don't like omniscience the information into my character's head. Show me how I would get that information, how I would suss that out naturally. Right?
the you know what's funny? I think this is mostly an issue for players, because
Hmm.
a lot of players really like having backstories. I don't know why. I usually tell my players, don't write a backstory, because if you're just gonna have a
Yeah.
backstory to have it, then there's no
Yeah.
point.
Right.
Your backstory is how you play your character. If you
Yeah.
bring your backstory through your way of playing, then perfect. You have an awesome backstory.
I'm
But if you
really
have a
yeah.
backstory for me as a GM because you want me to bring it up,
Right,
then
exactly. That, that sort of stuff comes up and it's like, well, I'm not gonna just for me, probably for some GMs, for a lot of GMs, it's just like uh, they'll make it happen. They'll write out the stuff and they'll force it. But it's like I'm not gonna force this on you. It feels weird. It feels like what is it? Patronizing maybe is the right word. I don't know, but it feels like it's like, dude, I'm your friend. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you how awesome your character is. And like, no, that's fucking weird. Like, um, I have a player that's his next character is he's like his backstory is he used to be a paladin to an evil god. I don't know which one. And when the game starts, he just wakes up out of his grave. I'm like, that's fucking awesome. And he's like, yeah, and he doesn't remember anything about his prior life. And I'm like, fucking great. Let's that's so sick. Let's go with it. And so we'll both kind of be fitting the pieces together,
and that's much better. That's organic, right? A lot
right,
of the
right.
players, they literally railroad themselves. Like, oh, my character has this backstory. He's like a good guy,
Yeah,
but his mom is evil. I want to have like a scene where I kill my mom, and then
right,
I get
right.
sad, and now it's going to be like
Yeah,
this character arc, and now I'm
yeah,
an evil guy, right?
yeah, yeah.
Everyone wants to have the character arc, but they don't know how to do it.
Right, right. It's storyboarding, right? That's storyboarding, and that's like because I've had some people say like, oh, it sounds like you'd like the Powered by the Apocalypse games, like Apocalypse World. I'm like, no, because I don't want to negotiate with the GM and I don't want to storyboard stuff. I want to play it in the moment because my friends that play those games will have some really cool stories to tell after the game is over. But the actual process of getting there is more like it's like it's not really role playing to me. It's like okay, you guys sat down and you generated like they played Masks, which is like it's like a teen superhero style game using the Apocalypse engine. Um, and the process of getting there is like lots of, well, could I use my powers to do this? And it's like, yeah, that's cool. That would make sense. But now somebody, somebody you love is going to get hurt. And so it's going to make your character feel like this. And go. Now I'll play the scene out. And it's like, that's not really role playing. That's a cool exercise to make a comic, but like it's not role playing to me. Um,
Congratulations, you just managed to railroad yourself. How do you
Right.
feel?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. And that's like kind of an inversion of test driving your turn. It's almost like that's what the game is test driving your turn. Which is weird. Like um
It's like, oh yeah,
I don't
my
like it.
car
Yeah.
is leaking fuel. So I guess what
Yeah.
I'll do is I'll empty the fuel can. So now there's
Right.
no more fuel to leak. It's
Yes,
like
there we go. Yeah, it's the car that the car that doesn't leak can't burn oil. Yeah, the
exactly.
uh
That is not how you progress this.
right,
I've
exactly.
seen the
Yeah.
light. I've stepped out of the cave and seen the
Right.
way of actually like
Yeah.
role playing your character.
Right,
I think
right.
that's the most interesting way to do it.
Mhm.
Um, I'm getting mixed signals because you talked a lot about description, but then the name of the stream is how to fix the combat slog. So I kind of want to like leap into that idea as well.
Well, it is through description. It's but it's all it just goes
True.
back to the role play solves everything. So it'll hey Neo Cal. Nice to see you.
Hey, how are you doing?
Um so that's just a question from Dice Tales, and then yeah, we can talk more about combat a little bit. There's a game out there that gives you some questions your players have to answer with their backstory. They're all really odd questions, like why do you always have to wear mismatched socks? Dude, that sounds bizarre, and it sounds like something the Apocalypse World devs would do. The
I've seen this type of thing before. Like,
yeah,
what is your character's favorite color?
yeah,
What
yeah.
is their favorite song?
And that's
What
like
would play?
it's very superficial stuff.
Yeah,
I like the way the 13th Age does it, where it's just your character has to have one unique thing. It doesn't have to be a full backstory. It just has to have one unique thing, like and then you can build around that. Like
yeah, it's
I
a pillar. You
yeah,
start
I
building like
didn't play
around it.
that game much, but I played I played a game where I just played an unusually tall dwarf, so like everyone thought he was a human, and he had like a weird complex about it. Where it's like, no, dude, I'm clearly a dwarf. Can you not see the beard? Can you not see the musculature? Can you not see the way I can feel the quality of the stone with my eyes closed? And
He
like,
tries to
what the
exaggerate his dwarven
I
qualities,
yeah,
and then
I was like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? It's like- but so and you just play off of it from there. You don't have to answer every question about your character before you play the game. In fact, I think it's counterintuitive, right? Just as segue that
Exactly.
into combat, don't answer every question about every arrow that could or couldn't have flown before you've done the combat, right? The point is to find out, right? It's fun. It's fun to find out what would happen if you do this. I think there's a very human, what is it? There's a very human need to experiment, to not just a theory, and theory is only one part of experimentation. You come up with the theory, but then you test the theory. You don't find out from God, yes, that works.
Exactly.
This thing, you do it, and then you find out, okay, that didn't work so well. Let's not do that again. Or
That's such a good point that you just made, because people like to think that humans are intellectual things. We're intellectual beings. We're smart,
yeah.
and everything we do is logical. That's not true.
No.
If you've ever been to the woods, when you hear a sound,
Oh
like
God, yeah.
your everything built around you, all of your nerves, you're built to be a surviving machine. If you hear a sound in the woods, you feel that creeping feeling in the back of your spine. That's because a human is barely logical. A human is very much a feeling based creature. So
we
if you're
share a
sitting
lot.
right,
We share a lot with deer. People think, oh, these deer are
yeah,
so stupid. They
yeah,
see a car coming and they just freeze in the middle of the road. What are you going to do when you hear a weird sound in the woods? You're going to freeze. You're going to stop
yeah.
moving, which is you are the deer in the headlights, because the owl that's in the tree next to you can see you bright as day. You think you can't be seen. You think it's in the middle of the dark. Oh, I better not move so I can't, so I'm in the. No, that thing can see you. So it's totally
Exactly.
illogical, but it got
So
us here. It got us to today.
exactly right. And I think that when people
Important.
say that they want this like clean, like sterile lab environment, like, oh, if I do this turn GM, will this happen? You're killing all of the human emotion. You're trying
Right, right,
to make an illogical being a human that actually
right.
enjoys running away, and they get like
Mhm,
that crazy chill when something scary happens around them,
mhm.
and you're cutting off all emotion and it
Right,
turning into a
right,
logical thing. If instead of just saying, okay, there's an orc who has 7 hit points out of 9 in front
oh,
of
no
you,
problem.
and he is about to attack you next turn, what do? You're killing all emotion.
Mhm,
But if in your mind you're thinking of yourself, I'm that orc, sorry, I'm that dwarf. My clan
mhm,
was butchered by these orcs. I'm
mhm.
hunting them.
Yeah,
This is my time to redeem myself. The orc is
right.
twice my size. I have a
Yep,
shield and an axe. If you
yep.
start thinking in that perspective, like you're surrounded by orcs, there's such a rich, like deep human feeling there. And I mean,
Right,
that's what we're looking for in an RPG, I'd argue.
right,
It's that
right,
the crazy feeling
Yeah,
of like being in the woods and hearing a sound and being scared,
yeah,
or facing overwhelming odds. A lot of
yep.
people say that it's the human, the male fantasy. It's either
Right,
fighting against
right,
overwhelming
and
odds or having a loving family.
and that's part of the attraction of unbalanced things, of things that aren't balanced. Is I want something that's going to evoke good role play, not necessarily be perfectly balanced. If it's egregiously unbalanced to the point that it like breaks the world and it makes it a world that's totally unbelievable, um then yeah, that's a problem. But if it's unbalanced as in like, oh, it's really unlikely that this, dwarf will beat this dragon in toe-to-toe combat, then it's like, well, yeah, that should be the case. They shouldn't go head to head in combat. They should they should find something else, and they should be scared. They should have reason to go, I can't fight that. What are you talking about? Yeah, yeah, it was impromptu
Hey,
for us.
Forge.
It's 217 for us as well. The this was prompted just sort of out of nowhere. I thought it was an interesting discussion because a lot of people were against describing their actions because they thought it slowed things down. And I was like, I don't understand how you could. Uh, a role playing game is kind of describing actions. That's kind of the basis of things, right? And it makes things faster. It makes combat especially faster because we don't have to ask all of the questions about where we're at, what our character's doing, this, that, and the other thing, right? You just do the things, and you find out by doing. Um, you find out the GM style. You find out the adjudicate. How things are going to be adjudicated when you experiment with spells, and you try to use a fireball to physically move something, and now you get to see if the GM's going to adjudicate whether a fireball produces force or just heat. And now it becomes a thing. And now you learn something, even if it fails, well, you learn something about the world, or at least the way that this GM adjudicated the world. No, a fireball just produces heat. It just incinerates that object rather than pushing it off the cliff like you wanted it to.
And if you want to beat the game, if your objective is to win the game, then you will pause the game right there. No. The fireball, and then you're gonna make your argument as to why the
And you're gonna
fireball.
look it up, right? You're
Yeah.
yeah.
You're gonna stop the game. You're gonna stop the whole
Right.
thing. Grab the book.
I maybe controversial take. I even don't like playing video games like that. I only look stuff up if I get stuck. Right?
Oh yeah.
I want to play a video game with my own dumb brain first. So I think we have like a 21st
Optimize the
century
fun out of video
21st
games. Yeah.
century problem of like backseat gamers of like, why is he using that gun? Oh my god, that gun sucks, dude. You got to use the battle rifle, dude. What do you trash? You don't use the assault rifle in Halo. It does no damage and the spread is so bad, which is defeated by the humble I like the assault rifle.
Yeah.
Right? Because I had a guy saying like, "Oh, if you just gave exotic weapon proficiency to everyone," and no, that's not what I did. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that is even what I did. Why would I ever use a longsword, not a falcata? Why would it? Because your culture doesn't have access to the falcata. Because your character doesn't know what the fuck a falcata is. Because you like the way a longsword looks, because you picked a longsword up off of the corpse of the last guy, the guy that you picked up, the guy that you just strangled to death with your bare hands. He had a longsword. He didn't have a falcata. That's why you would use the falcata.
Yeah.
Like there's 4 things I came up with off the top of my head. Like you're playing a game that's based around imagination. You don't have any of that imagination. Like.
And that's the worst part. People always say, "Oh, it's like you're playing through Lord of the Rings, man." And then you show up. No. You can't play a dwarf with a great axe because the great axe actually deals less damage per round than this weapon here. You should go for this weapon, and you should grab this weapon expertise. Never use a great axe. You can never be a dwarf with a great axe. That's stupid.
I don't like. I don't want you to pick a trap option, dude. Like, why would you do that? You're gonna, what? Why would you become a pirate? This isn't an aquatic campaign. Maybe I'm gonna make it an aquatic campaign. Maybe I'm gonna get in a boat. No, he's derailing things. Oh no, no, maybe I'm gonna be a pirate and I'm gonna get a flask of the flask of infinite water that they have, and I'm gonna fucking I'm gonna flood the whole area that we're in. So we're fighting in now. You're fighting in my territory. Yeah, we may be shit on dry land, but we're not on dry land, are we? That sort of thing. And I think it's fun to challenge yourself too, to challenge yourself to try and find these. Yes, it's suboptimal, but it says something about the guy that fights that way. Rurouni Kenshin, where he's got the katana that's you don't like anime, but he has a katana which is bladed on the false edge, which means that he really has to think about killing someone. Otherwise, he's using a blunt sword. And so his immediate response is to take out people non-lethally. That says
really
something about the character, right? The way you're describing those attacks. If you did have a standard longsword and you whipped it out and you beat the guy in the head with the flat of it instead of cutting his head off immediately, that says something about the character, right? You don't know if that guy has any information or what. You might just not like killing people, even though you'd be good at it, right?
I really like the S stock in Pathfinder. It's such a cool weapon. It's just really cool. Like to poke someone with like a massive needle, like a large S stock is really cool to play.
Oh yeah,
it's not optimal, but like it's fun.
Yeah.
Imagine playing the role in a role playing game, right?
Yeah.
I'm the refined knight. I'm not going to use a brutish greatsword. I'm going to use like the elegant little needle.
And another secret that Pathfinder players don't want you to know. You can just call it a longsword and use the stats for a falcata if you really wanted to, and that wouldn't actually break the game. It would actually be okay. You would be fine. The big falcata wouldn't come to your house in the middle of the night and kick your door in. It would be okay.
I think the Pathfinder Society will though. So careful with that one.
Oh yeah. Oh my god, that's why you don't play with Pathfinder. And people were making the good comment of like, yeah, teleport's a problem, and Paizo acknowledged it because there are so many modules that say, Teleport's banned because it breaks the module. That's like, okay, this is that's very unhuman, all right? That's not if you've already figured out a 2-second way to break something in your own game, then it's like, well, you got to go back to the drawing board, man. That's like, does Conway have a
System
YouTube channel?
I do, but it's mostly for memes. I want to
Yeah,
post like TRPG related content. I just
yeah, man.
didn't have the time. Although I have the
Right.
time to do this like late night, but whatever.
Yeah. But here we go. This is kind of
Yeah.
content, there you go. It counts.
Um, it's funny because
Comics
people can
videos.
intuit the notion that system is setting exactly by what you said. I think
Yeah, right.
everyone dogs on this idea that, oh no, yeah, you can't use teleport in this module. Everyone makes fun of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's always there and nothing is done about it. 5e,
Right.
same
It's
thing. Pathfinder happen all the time.
it's curious that people can point out the problems very rapidly, but they don't like solutions to those problems. Isn't that's odd, isn't it?
It's almost like you're enforced to play through the dungeons because that's the
Mhm.
experience you want. It's
Mhm.
not actually logical that you're playing through dungeons. It's a
Well,
dungeon because there's a dungeon.
because I feel that urge too, and I don't exactly because the logical solution to I see problems with Pathfinder is not spend years playing it anyways and tweaking it and making a homebrew document and then having hours of discussion on. That's not the logical answer. The logical answer is play a different game. But there's enough good there that you're like, I just one more thing, just one more twist. So I don't know. There is that human or maybe autistic specifically urge to make something work, to force it to work. And so yeah, I don't know if that has a psychological term that I'm not aware of
I
or
think
what.
I think Pathfinder is that house that you really want to
Right.
buy because it's in the
Right, man.
nicest place in town. It
Mhm.
looks nice, 3-story
Yep,
tall,
yep.
beautiful house. But it's the one that has the fucked up plumbing, fucked up electrics, right? Yeah, like it's the best house ever, but it's deeply flawed. But you still want it
Yep.
because it's a good house. I mean,
Right, right.
Pathfinder has so many good systems.
Mhm.
Like Ultimate Campaign, one of the most
Mm.
solid
Mhm.
books out there for
Yeah,
helping you run your campaign.
yep.
So many good subsystems there, and just like the sheer richness of like all of the different like magic items that you can give your players. So there's
Mhm.
so much inspiration that you can have there. It really is a nice house with the fucked up plumbing and electrics, right? Like you can see the structural issues, but damn, I want the house, man.
Yeah, right, right. Um, yeah, so maybe that's it. Maybe it's just a very deep-seated cost-benefit analysis, right? You're always running in the background even if you're not thinking about it. Um, Yeah, that might be it. But yeah, on a man, there's so much specifically on combat in Pathfinder that because it is the system that's written most about in Pathfinder is the combat. So if you're not describing during like the meat and potatoes of the game, it man, it just those problems become so exacerbated. Um, right? You're not describing, the classic, oh, I cast magic missile into the darkness. It's like, what the fuck? You can't do. Oh, okay. Well, at least if he said that, he described what he's doing, and I can adjudicate that as a GM as like the spell fizzles out in your hand. As that can't be done. That's not how that spell works, right? Uh, but if you just say I cast magic missile, it's like on whom? On what? What's going on here? Where are you? Now we have to figure out, well, wait, are you in range to do that? Well, okay. On what guy? You got to describe, to just the basic amount.
But that's I think the point where I think the role play should supersede the system itself.
Right, right.
Because if you have a spell that can target a creature and you can throw
Mhm.
a bolt, what
Yeah.
is actually in universe preventing you from casting it like the pillar to a house?
Right. Yeah, there you go. That means
So
and it never misses creatures either, so that means that it's like, life seeking, right? So that would immediately tell you something where it's like, "Ah,
oh,
okay,
that's cool.
there's nothing in this room." Because if there was, it would have immediately gone, it would have gone straight to the guy. That man, yeah, and see, there we go. There we go.
So
And
the
there you can
the
add.
missiles
Yep.
they manifest, they find no
Mhm.
life and they fizzle out.
Yep.
It's
Yeah,
so cool.
exactly. Yeah, and that would add as you're describing, if that's what you're trying to do with the spell, you could describe that, I try to suss out if there's any creatures hiding in the darkness by casting magic missile. Then it's like, oh, now I know what you're trying to do. That's cool. And they might immediately, seek something. They might fly through the darkness and strike one skeleton and just briefly illuminate that there's like 100 of them. And then they fizzle out, and now it's dark again in the room. And all you can hear is the clattering of bones. And it's like, that would be an oh shit moment.
That's a cool concept, but here's an antithesis to it. At that point, when the player does it, what if they keep doing it at every single point in every single dungeon? Basically using it as a detect life spell, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to keep portraying a universe that follows basic rules, then it would need to keep functioning that way, right?
Right, yeah.
How would you adjudicate something like that?
I would adjudicate it in the same way that I adjudicated detect magic, which I ended up saying, if you can cast detect magic, you just have it on permanently. Like I will just, you don't need to do the thing. It's so obvious that that's what you're gonna do that we can cut out the chaff of the description of I can't sign my cantrip. I cast detect magic. Okay, what are the auras? Once you've done it once, it's like, oh, okay, cool. That tells me. But once we're on session, 27 of a campaign or something like that, I know that that's just an ability you can have. Kind of like Superman flying. The first time you see Superman fly in a new comic series or in the first, it's like a big deal. There's many panels of it happening. But now 80, 90 years on, when you see Superman fly, he just jumps up and then he just keeps going, and it's like one panel, and nobody makes a big deal out of it, right? It's just a thing that happens. The resolution is much lower.
And I believe that the arcane missiles thing wouldn't be as bad because you're always spending a spell slot doing it as well.
Right, exactly. So it's not something you can do infinitely. That's why I brought up detect magic, which is like something you can just do infinitely. It's like, okay, then it's just sight. It's effectively just like tremor sense or dark vision at that point, where it's just like, this is just a thing you have. You just can see. And I think it makes sense for like someone who's really in tune with the magic of the world, that it's just like, if they don't even have to sign it. They can just see the magical auras, like, just by at a glance.
And that's cool. See, system is setting.
Right. Yeah.
System is setting doesn't mean that you need to throw the system out. You can intuit things from the system to work on the setting itself.
Yeah. Permanent detect magic can be a narrative annoyance. I need to think on that a bit. Yeah. It's really cool. You can use it as a way to describe areas as like blinding, where it's like, holy shit, there's a ton of magic in here, as they walked into like a lich's phylactery, because this lich has cast so many spells in here, so there's so many lingering magical auras. Their phylactery is, of course, insanely powerful. So it's like, fuck, dude, it's like walking into a room that's brightly lit with night vision goggles on, and you're like, holy shit,
exactly.
Like, turn this off. And they're having to like think about the wizard's like rubbing his eyes, like, god damn, what the something, I don't know what it is, but there's something magic in here. It's like the whole place. So,
But that's cool though, right? I've been talking a lot about humanistic design for D&D. Like, your active defense, the player feels like they want to defend themselves, so let them. And also the idea that instead of being like this token in a board, you're actually like this person, and really picturing yourself as that person, right? Another level of humanistic design would be to not have true alien character or true alien senses. Because now if you have to visualize the scene at every point and you can just see outline of magic all around you, it can get more and more taxing to be able to imagine something like that, right?
Right.
To a certain extent, like system is setting, and a setting and a system can be better for you to imagine your character in that regard. I think Pathfinder can get silly in places.
It definitely can.
I hate how this became a Pathfinder.
Well, that's sort of what spawned the conversation. So
true. But like one of the things that is very silly about Pathfinder is when you're decked out in your 12 magic items. Oh yeah, I have a +3 sword. Oh yeah, this one is a bracer of defense.
I know it happens in kind of all the D&Ds. Even back to AD&D, they had the magic item cards and that whole thing. So
yeah, but that is so silly because you're walking around like you're a clown. Like each piece of equipment came from a different adventure you went on.
Right.
I think I've seen some art of characters actually wearing all their magic items, and they look like these outlandish entities walking around, dressed in several different colors, kind of like a Lensknecht.
That's exactly what I was about to say, is that it's like it makes sense for like what's effectively a traveling mercenary though, that's like, wearing the all this, because the Longsneck, they were wearing Swiss style clothing, they had some Swedish style elements to their clothing, they're using German weapons, they're, it's totally incongruous, but it makes sense. I also just run like what I think is a really common rule, which is that um oh God, yeah, yeah, you are absolutely dripping in
Oh my
magical
god, that's
items. You
insane.
you would be blind, and it becomes like almost a way for casters to look at somebody and go, "Holy shit, that guy's powerful. We shouldn't fuck with him," or "That guy's rich. We should rob him." One of one of the two. Um, and oh, dude, magic tattoos are so cool. That's a really cool, just like visual thing. I also just run the thing of that like magic items. I believe rules is written. This is something that I think is rules is written that I is possibly a house rule. Can resize like up to one size category and will slowly repair themselves as well if left alone. Uh, I figure you can change the way they appear. Like that's fine. Like that, I don't think it's broken for like minor magic items to have a glamour effect applied to them, where it's like, yeah, they can look however you want.
That's a really cool concept. I like that because
Right.
now that
Yeah.
says something about the world. Maybe
Yeah.
whoever
Yeah.
created these magic items wanted them to blend in, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's a world where the magic items are illegal. So
Yeah.
now, oh,
Yeah.
when you put on the magical plate, it
Yeah.
will look at the other pieces of armor around you and
Yeah.
fashion
Right.
itself, right? That'd be pretty cool.
Right, right. Or they're just somebody most of the smart, wealthy people, which most, wizards and casters are in Pathfinder. You think of a smart, wealthy person in real life. Do they wear a gold chain and brag about how much money they have and drive a Porsche? No, they're usually the guys that drive like, yeah, like 5-year-old Honda Civics, and and you wouldn't
It's
know it. They're wearing, you wouldn't know it until you're talking to them for long enough, and then you're like, oh, holy shit, you have to get to know this guy to know he's a millionaire, right? So
yeah,
it just makes
it's quite
sense to
often
me,
the opposite, right?
right?
It's
Yeah,
usually the people who are lower in societal power that try to show
yeah,
themselves at all of these like
yeah,
more expensive brands and things like
hmm
that. Usually the people who are actually societal, powerful, they will get
yeah,
paid to wear those clothes, you know.
right, exactly.
Like, we'll pay
And it
you to
becomes
wear our brand.
that becomes another thing that description tells you about the world, and it could be relevant in combat. If um could be relevant in combat, especially with all of these items where it's like, if you don't, almost no one ever describes what an NPC is wearing in this case, but if you describe that an NPC is wearing this stuff, or vice versa, an NPC sees that a play, you could describe an NPC eyeing your character up and down and going, I'm not attacking that dude. I know even if you knew nothing, your sword would just find its way straight to my head. Like that, because you could give
Exactly, yeah.
a +5 longsword to a peasant and they would be able to kill like most normal people pretty easily.
That's a really cool idea, actually. Like
Yeah.
you're playing like Kingmaker or something like that,
Yeah.
and a craftsman shops and he says, "I'll
Yeah.
I'll pay you to use my +3 longsword," and tell
Yeah.
them that I made it, right?
Yeah.
The king
Yeah.
of this realm.
The idea of uh the idea of sponsorships goes back to like the Roman era, that's
He does, yeah.
it's very old. It was something that was cut out of the first Gladiator because the producers thought it would be too unrealistic. Like people wouldn't believe it. Like, uh,
They would actually like read out like where each piece of
yep,
equipment was made, if I recall correctly.
yep,
Which
yep.
is
And
like
they would have
awesome.
like like around the arena, they would have um like olive oil sponsorships and stuff like just like in the modern day. It would not be out of place to see
That's
uh,
so cool, man.
a craft sponsorship on a NASCAR. That's
And I think that's a strong teller of setting is that the people need to feel
yeah.
smart.
See, that's a cool thing. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's worth every penny. Where even though it does nothing else, it's that description. It tells you it tells you a lot about the character, probably
It
vain,
does, yeah.
and but also, that's also going to say something to other people. They're going to be, if they're overthinking it, they're going to be like, does this guy have like a bard imprisoned in his amulet? Is it like an
Oh,
amulet that
that's
steals
cool.
souls? And it's like, oh no, it's just
But there's also the idea that music is powerful. And this is something that a
yeah.
lot of humans believe throughout most of history, right? I mean, the Bible says how they played a song to bring down the walls of a city. And it's also like in almost every single fantasy setting. I think in Lord of the Rings, they in Silmarillion rather, they
Yep.
sing, they talk about how the gods sang to create the world. Like
Yep.
music and rhythm is magical, right?
Yep.
A lot of people thought of that. A lot of magical rituals included music, right? So that's really cool. I could totally see like imagine like a guy coming up to you and a song they would only hear in church begins playing from his armor. That
Oh
would be
yeah. Yeah, that
incredible,
would
right?
be cool. Yeah.
And that's really cool. And I think this ties back to what I wanted to say, that people really feel a setting is lived in if they can believe the people there. And
Mhm.
I think back to what you said of like the Roman gladiators having sponsorships.
Mhm.
It really shows just how people didn't change. People have
Mhm.
always been smart,
Yeah,
and this
yeah. Right.
and this is usually something that people make fun of in the past, like World
Right.
War One or the
Mm.
Napoleonic era. Like, why were they standing in place with their guns and shooting
Right.
back and forth? Were they stupid?
Yeah.
And it's really cringy to see
Mhm.
people look back in the past as if your ancestors were somehow stupid, right?
But
Because let me
but
tell you,
people
if you
would,
were a skirmisher
yeah.
in like in the Napoleonic era, you'd just be run down by hussars.
Yeah, yeah,
If you weren't standing in
exactly.
formation, you'd just be run down by hussars. And there
Yep.
you go, and you lost your
Yep.
life.
Yeah,
The people
yeah.
in the past were intelligent, and I think that if
Yeah,
you can
they were
pass the
intelligent in a
influence,
different context, right? You know,
true.
it's not our context today, so it's harder for people today to uh it's harder for people today to understand it, right? Um and that's
Indeed.
also part of it. I think that a lot of the people who describe combat and who have to describe combat today don't have any experience with it themselves, but more than that, they don't seek out, right. You don't have to be, it's okay to, if you're playing, a monk, to be a, an armchair martial artist. You don't even have to actually do it yourself, but you do have to know, like, at least how it looks. How would you describe somebody, doing what Michael J. White does in a movie, or what Khabib Nurmagomedov does in the UFC? How would you describe that? You don't have to be able to do it yourself. Where the whole LARPing pushback comes from. It's not about or acting. It's not about doing it yourself. You don't have a stuntman. Just just describe what the stuntman would do.
Yeah, and I think this is where we walk into the topic of
Mhm.
player prep. And I
Mhm.
think that sometimes I want to prep more as a player than as a GM. Because if I'm playing
Oh,
a
yeah.
character that is a, let's say I'm playing a character as a politician, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm not charismatic. I don't know how to
yeah,
talk to a crowd.
yeah, yeah.
The thing is, you don't need to,
No,
read a book how to influence people and make friends or
no,
something like that,
yeah.
right? What you need to do is like just look at a cool character
Yeah,
that does it. Like
yeah,
watch
just
a series.
do film study. Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
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 you don't need to be a public
yeah,
speaker. You need
yeah.
to be able to at least emulate one.
And
And if
that's fun, that's more
yeah,
fun than prep, right? Prep often feels like homework, but if your prep is like, I'm about to run a medieval fantasy game, so I'm gonna watch some Conan. I'm gonna like that's that's way more fun than going, oh God, well I'm gonna make my own like sometimes I'll make my own NPCs and stat blocks, but like a lot of the times I'll just pull them from like, oh, I need a fighter who should be like about on par with the party. Uh yeah, there's warrior NPC. Great, we'll use his stat block. I took me 5 seconds. That's and
and I think people
you
like don't understand prep in that regard.
yeah,
It's always like, how do you prep? And then the
yeah.
GM starts talking about like writing scenes and preparing like the
I
mood
don't
for
know
each
what the,
scene.
I don't know what the fucking
I
scene's gonna be.
yeah, and I read a book. There's a book called Hamlet's Hit Points, and it's so
Mhm,
painful to read it because
mhm.
it's such a
I've
bad
heard.
example to
Yeah,
people. Hamlet's Hit Points
yeah.
describes how like a filmmaker makes like the climax and drama of a scene and telling you how to do it in your role playing game. It's
Mm.
so painful.
But
Um,
but
to,
that's
to
just
me, let me tell you what prep looks like.
yeah.
I was gonna run the game for Nick and Zonalar, the
Mhm.
Warhammer 40k game, and I wanted a cool
Yep,
planet. So I went
yep.
for a walk. I went walking. It had rained before, and
Mhm,
I saw like this flooded little like piece of like lower ground. It's
mhm.
like, oh, that's cool. I want a flooded planet. I want like an eternally
Yeah,
flooded planet.
yeah.
And that was my prep. I got
Yep.
inspired by something. I
Mhm,
was like, okay, how do I come bring
mhm.
this to the table now? And
Yep.
that is how prep should be. Prep should
Yeah.
be interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
and like I'll go. I won't start with the mechanics. I'll start with a thing I want to do, and then go. Well, it's Pathfinder, so there's got to be a mechanic for that, and then I'll look up what the mechanic is and be like, all right, I need to know now that I know how this works. Now I'm done, right? Now that I know in your example, the like, all right, well, I already know there's difficult terrain, and then I'm like, I'll refresh myself on the swimming rules. Boom, I'm done. That's it. There's my and obviously in session 0, you tell the players like, hey, this is what we're going to be playing on. Familiarize yourself with all the underwater combat rules and stuff like that. And oh god, yeah, dude, all of the books on prepping and low prep, they're all slop. It almost makes me want to write a book because that's my background is in English. I almost want to write a book to put something, dangle something out there like Shauner did, and maybe somebody will latch onto it, but on something maybe more specific than the topic of just role play in general. But aside from that digression, some I will prep like if it's a pre-made setting, if it's Wrath of the Righteous I'm running through right now, because obviously that Pathfinder tells you there's this big hole, the world wound that's just spewing out demons, and it's been doing that for hundreds of years. Well, eventually most like good and powerful people are gonna go, something's got to be done about that.
Something's gonna give, yeah.
To do that. And
there is an added pressure to running a module though, because you also want to pass the module in a. You want to give your genuine shot to run the module, right? You don't want to just make something up.
Well,
there's an added pressure there.
Yeah, I suppose. I want to make some stuff up though. I want to
definitely, yeah.
I want to, there are things where I look, and I think Wrath of the Righteous does some things very well. Where like the Ivory Labyrinth they have is like it is thought to be like the origin of all mazes. It's like a planar maze, so it's organic and it's like a living creature, so it shifts. So any of the like things you think of the like cheetah maze, it knows that it avoids that. You can't fly out. And what they tell you, Paizo's really smart here. They say, actually, it turns out that mazes in RPGs suck. When you pre-write a maze, all people do is hug the left wall and leave a breadcrumb trail. And once they've done that once, they have played every maze forever until the end of time. Because that's just how mazes work, right?
And that circles back to the idea.
Unless you start playing with physics. If you start playing with the idea of how physics works, of how the metaphysics of the realm works, and they start describing, oh, we're just hugging the left wall and we're leaving our breadcrumb trail. And after 2 seconds, you see your breadcrumb trail again. Now they're like, what? There's no way that we've just made a circle in 2 seconds. And the path that was to your right when you entered is gone. It's not there anymore. And it's like, what the fuck? And you're slowly figuring out, it's like, what the hell kind of place is this? And behind the screen, as far as the prep goes, there's one paragraph of description that Paizo gives you. That's excellent, in my opinion. That's cool, the way to do it. Yeah,
it would be really hard to roleplay something that it's like a very alien environment. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the not the adventure paths, but like the very like quick modules, like Feast of Even More. Some really cool scenes there that I don't forget.
Yep.
And it's tougher to run a module. I think a lot of people say if you're a newer GM, run a module.
No, I think it's hard.
It's harder,
because you have to be able to analyze what you can cut and what is like important to the setup, right? Where to drop your players in. Maybe I shouldn't drop my players in at the starting point. Maybe there's actually another spot in here that would be better. I should cut half of these combat encounters because they're there just to be a health tax or to pad it out to make sure people are showing up to the game shop more, and you have to get an eye for that. You have to get an eye for, I can take that out. That doesn't need to be here. This is poorly written. I should cut that out. Separating the wheat from a chaff it's
exactly
a skill, right?
A newer player will want an example of how to run, but then they'll just realize, oh, this is awful. Do I really have to run this? And they're not going to have the decisiveness to say, I'm not going to run this, right? Because they want to convey the adventure the way it is. And I mean, the idea of a book is like really interesting too. Even there is a book called Sly Flourish's Lazy Game Master Prep, and it's still over prepping in my opinion. Way over prepping. And I don't know. I think that
NeoCal, I never was either until probably the last few years, and then I realized you just run the module or adventure path as a setting, as just these are, you just read like every few pages and you're like, that's stuff that's going on in the world. Here's an NPC that's doing stuff in the world. Are they going to do exactly what's written in here? No, because your players are an organic, moving force, right? So likewise, this NPC is going to be an organic moving force. So you just, like, I sandbox inside a module, which breaks some people's brains. They're like, what are you talking about? These are two different things. I'm like, but they don't have to be.
Exactly right.
It's like the little list of items and weapons and stuff is like, those are just descriptions of stuff that exists in this dungeon. Maybe a character's picked them up and moved them to a different location. If you read it and you're like, I don't like that being there, maybe somebody picked it up and moved it somewhere else, and now it's a different encounter. Uh, and that way you can run them through multiple times with some of the same characters too. And maybe it's been like hundreds of years apart, and they kind of are familiar with it, but things have changed enough for it to be run through again.
That is a much better way to do it, as if it were a setting.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I actually do in prep is I say this NPC is important and he's smart. He's going to prep something. I don't prep anything. I role play my NPCs prepping, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that, there's going to be a scene where the players fight a Thoras. No, I'm going to say, I'm a lich. I want to kill these bunch of whippersnappers that have been going after my plans. I'm going to go to this plane of fire. I'm going to kidnap this demon. I'm going to drag him back to the mortal plane. Like, that's how I prep. I prep by playing the other character as well as with the time that my players allotted me through their play. It also makes the world feel more alive, in a sense.
Yeah. I would love to do a no prep game once. That sounds so fun.
You should join us. We're doing a lot of no prep games.
Yes.
Over with Uriah and Adam.
Yes. Hopefully I will be able to join one. That'd be awesome. I think that's a really good one, because they're pretty much all you have to work with is description, right? That's like that's your tool, So
yeah, but it's great because I was gonna be have a good night, Neo Cal.
Yes, we're gonna wrap it up soon as well, because I have work tomorrow as well. So
I ended up rolling for me to be the game master of a no prep game, and it was so cool because we rolled. I think it was space heroic. So the setting was space and the theme was heroic, and that was really cool because we had like a few ideas. We bounced up a few ideas here and there, and I got to, like, in the span of like an hour and a half, not even 2 hours, we went through this crazy like space adventure, and I even created like my own like space setting. It was like inspired by Warhammer 40K and inspired by a bunch of stuff. And there was like even like cool, even like the final like twist of it, quote unquote, felt like really cool. And it was like a little like sci-fi short, like when you read those like little tiny sci-fi shorts, and like they leave you a message. Like there's a lot of good ones by Isaac Asimov.
Like or Harrison Bergeron.
And I mean, that's what it feels like. It feels like you're playing through a little short, and you're getting to experience a little world, right? Because everyone talks about the 3-year campaign, but it'll be so interesting to actually go through like small stories and learning about worlds here or there, right?
Yeah.
Having the creativity to do that is pretty
cool. Sometimes it's nice to be left with questions and not have every loose end tied. It's nice to be thinking like, what's going on there, and maybe you can revisit it at some point. That's if it was compelling enough, rather than trying to force something. Like, I think campaigns should come about naturally, because the first session was so good and so interesting that you're like, I want more of that, rather than going, we're playing a campaign and the first session fucking sucks, and then you're like, well, I hope the second one's better, and it's just forcing yourself to go through it. Because I think a lot of people are forcing themselves to go through the motions, especially in combat, where it's just like, what? It's my turn again? Yeah, I attack it. It's on the macro and the micro scale. It's like, oh yeah, we're playing this dumb game again. Okay. Well, it's my turn again. Yeah, I rolled d20. Oh, it's 5. I miss. Okay, bye. And I'm not gonna. I'll have to wait 20 minutes to do that again. Of course, people aren't describing when that's what feels like a slog. It's not the description that's slowing things down. There's a bunch of other stuff that's slowing things down that is making like any amount of time lengthening feel like an eternity. But a lot of times when you're describing, it makes it just makes everything it makes all the difference. It really does. When because people aren't going to remember the number 17 minus 250. They're going to remember the time that they fell off a cliff and hit terminal velocity before splattering on a jagged mountain face below, right? Those are the same thing. That's what's happening, right? But you're gonna remember the description a lot better. It's a lot more vivid than just you take 250 damage. Oh, I die. Or being and people have an obsession too with the why of things, and I think we should, right? It's the difference between uh I try to cast create water in his lungs, and the GM going, you can't do that. I was like, well, what? Why can't I do that? Well, because the rules say you can't do that. Okay, adjudicate it, right? Instead, the description being, for some reason, though you can normally place water wherever you want with the spell, the water sort of juts out and spawns above the guy's head instead of in his lungs where you wanted it to. Then it's like, oh, okay. So there's something weird going on here. And it might lead them to experimenting with it, right?
That's really cool. Maybe everyone has a background magical aura that fizzles with the spell. It was meant to be
Right.
a
Yeah.
very like
Yeah.
economical spell. They use very little magical power, which is why it's like a cantrip or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can always come up with a reason, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. If you prepare everything too much and suddenly something like that falls in your lap, what do? There is no prep to fall back behind. It is always good to improve yourself, to be the best version of yourself that you can be without prep. Because just your mind is the only thing that you always have available at any given time. There's nothing else that you can prep in a way. Did I just say that no prepping is the best prep? Oh my god, I'm kind of
There
stupid.
you go. We're getting circular, yeah. But
You heard it here first, folks.
there you go. Yep. No prep is awesome because we end up playing in settings I never would have thought of on my own. Yeah, yeah, and there exactly. You can't. There's no box text, so it's all description that has to come off the cuff. And usually it necessitates the system being fairly simple too. So your mechanics are doing less of the heavy lifting. You really have to be able to on the fly be able to figure out, okay, what does a hit here mean? What does what does success here mean? Well, it's all through description. So yeah, I think a lot of that. I'm gonna try to wrap it up here. I'm getting tired and I gotta go to work tomorrow.
Of course, man.
But I would say, to leave people with a conclusion, thank you for watching if you actually made it to this end of the video, or if you just skipped around and got here. The conclusion, combat. Why do people think it's a slog? Why do people not like description? Well, sort of circular. They don't like description because combat's already a slog and description will slow things down, but it's backwards. Description will speed things up. You'll know where you are. You'll know where your character is in relation to other things. You'll know where the other characters are because they're also describing. And the GM will have an easier time understanding what it is you're trying to do with your actions rather than you test driving your turn, going back to the dealership with your turn and going, no, I don't really like that. The tires didn't feel right. And now you've just wasted 30 minutes of the salesman, me, the GM. He wasted 30 minutes of his time. He wasted 30 minutes of your time. And we've just gone back to the drawing board. Just describe what you do, and then things will happen. And that works in a high trust society. You want to live in a high trust society. Don't GM in Detroit. Maybe that's the don't random people you picked up off the street. Don't pick up hitchhikers. Don't pick up randos. And vet your players.
If you disagree with us, try to improve yourself. It's
Yeah,
totally fine to disagree, but having the mentality that this is all you're going to get out of the hobby, it's never going to be better.
Yeah.
Roleplay solves everything. That is my final message. The more you roleplay, the better.
Yes, roleplay solves everything. Thank you guys for coming to this super late night stream. We actually had quite a few more commenters than I thought we would have. Yes, even the most rules light of systems will be a slog if they're out of character. I don't think it's something you're going to fix entirely with mechanics. Yeah. Also, don't roleplay in Brazil, despite the fact that we seem to be getting a ton of role players out of Brazil. I don't know. It's
I'll try not to roll Brazil, no promises.
Yes. Yes. Good night, Elf Hunter, and good night, everyone else. Thank you guys for watching. See ya. Oh, we're gonna have to. I forgot.